Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Squidpeg, and in today's video I want to discuss the artist and depression. So let's get started. Before we get started, I just want to give a quick trigger warning. As I mentioned, I am going to be talking about depression and mental health in general. Some portions of the discussion will be dark and cover topics that some may not be in the mental space to hear or think about. So if you feel that you may be in this group, please skip this video, maybe go listen to music or watch some fluffy animal videos or something else, and I will see you next time. So have you ever noticed that people who are considered creative seem disproportionately susceptible to depression or anxiety or some other mental health struggle? At least where I was growing up, it almost seemed like it was a given that any singer or poet or other artist had to be quote-unquote crazy or depressed or have some kind of mental health issue. And being an artist myself and having been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, CPTSD, and ADHD at various points in my life, I always found it really fascinating the apparent link between the two worlds. And so, of course, I spent a long time just learning a little bit about it through independent study. And I just wanted to, talk about what I've learned and sort of my opinion on the topic in this video. Of course, this video is not meant to diagnose or be a diagnostic tool or anything of the sort. It is not mental health or any kind of health advice. And it's honestly just information that I have learned and my take on it. So the first official association and studies of mental health and mental illness and its relation to creativity was in academic literature around the 1970s. But of course, assumption of their relation kind of dates all the way back to the time of Aristotle and maybe even before that. In those times, which I guess it could be called ancient times, it often seemed to be just a given, again, that genius of any kind, meaning academic genius, artistic genius, anything like that, required a, quote, touch of madness. You might often hear the term that a person was touched. Typically, not always, but that typically had a slight negative connotation to it because it meant that they had been touched by madness. Since the 70s, again, many studies, actual scientific studies, have been performed that show a heavy link between those who have mental disorders and being in the creative professions or having creative hobbies. This includes things like writers, poets, singers, artists, sculptors, any kind of artistic or creative profession. If you're interested, I do have some of the studies and their findings linked in the description box below. It is a little bit more technical reading, but again, if you're interested, those links are below. And one theory that seems to have come out of those studies is that, again, those with mental health disorders literally process the world differently than others. It's not just like a perception from the outside. People think that somebody with a mental disorder just thinks or sees the world differently. There actually have been brain imaging scans that show that those with schizotypal personality disorders can actually access both hemispheres of the brain much faster than those without. And that means that more than likely they're able to make connections between novel concepts much faster. And they also showed an increased activation of the right prefrontal cortex, which is the portion of the brain that's often associated with creativity or creative thinking. It's also the portion of the brain that's often associated with divergent thinking. So it's not simply people from the outside thinking that somebody with mental health issues or a mental health disorder is different. It's not just that they're different, it's literally that their brain works differently. Of course, this is not to say that all creatives have some kind of mental illness or that it's required to have any kind of mental disorder to be creative. There's tons and tons and tons of wonderful artists of all types who don't have any kind of mental health issues. It's just there seems to be a link between having these issues and being drawn to creative professions or hobbies. Some creative people have even been diagnosed long after their death as either being bipolar or depressed or having some other mental health issue based on their biographies, letters and correspondence from them, interviews, and even third-party accounts. It's important to note that any of these diagnoses are not actual medical diagnoses. They are based on the evidence that we have on that person after they've already passed, but that person was never officially assessed for the whatever it is that we happen whatever label it is that we happen to put on them afterwards. It's just sort of a best guess based on things that were present in their lives that we know about. And to sum it up kind of perfectly, Lord Byron once wrote, quote, "We of the craft are all crazy. Some are affected by gaiety, others by melancholy, but all are more or less touched." So again, that term, touched, meaning a little bit touched by madness. Many scholars speculate that Michelangelo lived with at least depression. They argue that elements of depression are prominent in a lot of his sculptures and poetry and even some of his paintings. And even Michelangelo himself once wrote in a letter to his father, quote, "I lead a miserable existence and reck not of life nor honor that is of this world. I live wearied by stupendous labors and beset by 1,000 anxieties. And thus I lived for some 15 years now, and never an hour's happiness have I had." Which honestly makes me really sad to hear. We know of a lot of fantastic artists of all different sorts that, like, whether or not they were massively popular while they were alive or not, they, in their own personal lives, they experienced a lot of sadness, anxiety, depression, things like that. Another famous example is, of course, Van Gogh, who was not popular as an artist while he was alive, unfortunately, suffered many mental health struggles and was institutionalized at at least one point in his life, and ended his life at the age of 37. And one reason that I personally think that there's such a high link between art and mental health, as in those who have mental health issues are drawn to art, is that it is a wonderful way to express sometimes really big feelings and thoughts that can't properly be expressed or explored with talking alone. And of course, for many years, the creative arts, from visual arts to writing to music and drama, have been used in actual therapy for those who are recovering from things like mental illness or addiction. There's, of course, several cultural beliefs around the world that deep pain enhances creativity, and creative acts help to heal those wounds, so it's kind of a cycle that helps to feed on itself. And the healing powers of creativity are seen frequently in everyday life. As artistic outlets are often encouraged as a way to improve well-being, it can also have an incredible impact on just mental health in general as a day-to-day practice. And it also helps some people find meaning and significance and an increased of sense or purpose. And that has been documented in some studies of retirement homes or hospitals that take care of terminally ill or elderly. A lot of the times, if they are able to pick up a creative hobby, it actually helps improve their overall health and their quality of life. But here is one aspect that I'm not sure is explored very well, at least not to this point. How much of the mental stress that we as artists are seen to have, how much of it is actually caused by the creative profession or the hobby itself? There has been one study that I know of that suggested the high levels of anxiety and depression among musicians and artists in particular could be explained partially by the nature of their working conditions. And when you think about it, the messages that we as artists receive every day, especially online, is we're expected to condense our entire process, or everything that we do to create our art, down into a seconds-long video or a post with a few slides in it. And we are expected to produce content like that, new, fresh content like that, on a daily basis. And that's if we're not even doing it for money. If we're doing it for money, we're expected to have high output at very low rates a lot of the times. Jumping through these hoops means that we in our craft might be deemed worthy of a digital pat on the head through a like or a share, and not doing so means that we're just kind of operating in a vacuum, which creativity doesn't really thrive that well in a vacuum. And of course, all of this was happening before AI even entered the picture. So now we have an extra level of non-humans to try and kind of compete with. So I think that a lot of the times, the nature of being an artist, whether you're trying to do it for money or you're simply doing it as a hobby, there are some aspects to just being an artist of any kind that bring with it some level of stress and anxiety that we have to find ways to navigate and deal with, which usually manifests as creating more art. So I think that If there is a point to all of it, it's to know that if you are an artist of any kind and you're kind of struggling with feelings like this or mental health struggles, just know that you are definitely not alone. It does happen to be a very large portion of the artistic community that struggles with things like this. Obviously, if it becomes serious issues, there are help resources to be sought out. And knowing that creating the art itself is a great tool for dealing with these feelings or struggles, for me personally, is very helpful. It's also really helpful to deal with one particular aspect of it, which is the aspect of sharing it online and worrying about how it's going to be perceived or received. I think taking the pressure away from that, or taking the power away from that, is extremely helpful. Meaning, if you are going to share your work online, don't do it for the likes or the shares or the comments or whatever. Do it because you created a thing and you are happy about the thing, and then just continue creating for yourself. Know that it is something that you need to do for your own mental health, that it is making yourself better, and it is actually making the world better. So that is a brief, I know it doesn't feel as brief, but that is a brief overview of the topic of depression or mental health in general and the arts, and my own personal opinion on it. If you have any thoughts or insights that you would love to share, I'd love to see those in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.